Let's go ahead back to you here, Matt, and I guess I think we were even talking about some things related to CDs that might install some software to do some things, but this is kind of turning that upside down a little bit, right?
A little bit. So Stephen Tompkinson at the NCC Group did some really interesting work with Blu-ray. Now, Blu-ray we all know as the format you play high definition video on. It was the one that won over HD DVD, etc. Turns out that Blu-ray actually supports a standard of Java called BDJ. And what BDJ is used for is for adding small applications or special user interfaces to Blu-rays. So sometimes you'll pop in a disc, you'll see a special menu pop up, and maybe you'll be able to play a game on the disc. Maybe there's some sort of trivia.
Kind of variation of JavaScript, perhaps, or?
No, JavaScript is completely separate from Java.
Okay, but it sounded like this is kind of creating some similar kind of functionality that is to create more dynamics on a website.
It gives you much more flexibility in what you're creating. It's not just menus where you can go from one button to the next. It's being able to have that interaction.
Right.
And a lot of people love having that on the disc, like to play a game related to their favorite movie. Unfortunately, it means that someone has to be writing code that runs on whatever you're playing your Blu-ray in. Now, there is a sandbox within the Blu-ray, the BDJ standard, which is supposed to prevent code in that space from interacting with your operating system or your device or things like that.
Java would.
Exactly.
Java runs in a virtual machine, but it gets escaped all the time.
Precisely.
And they've been fixing those bugs.
Yeah, they fix
years.
it along the way, but eventually here and there people find ways to escape the VM. So.
Right. Well, that's exactly where we're going with this. They found two bugs. One is in the CyberLink Power DVD player, which if anybody's ever had like an OEM machine with a pre-installed DVD player, chances are it might have been PowerLink. Turns out that PowerLink does...
So this is a player in a computer?
In Windows, yes. Right. I'm getting there. There's an even more exciting one coming right after that. But it seems that the system does have a check to see whether or not code should be allowed to run, and it checks against a list of threads. It turns out there's also a call available to you within BDJ on that machine, in that player, to put yourself in that list. So you put yourself in the list, and then the check runs, and you're golden, and you can run code. You've escaped the sandbox. So basically, your Blu-ray player is executing on code that you did not expect on your machine, not just within the sandbox. So that's obviously a problem.
So potentially, somebody could write something that would install malware just from you playing a Trojanized Blu-ray disc on your PowerLink, whatever, not PowerLink, Power DVD, CyberLink Power DVD player inside your computer.
Exactly.
And it could put some malware down your machine.
Just sort of a comparison contrast here. If I have a CD that's got a Trojan on it, or just a regular DVD, not a Blu-ray format, what's fundamentally different here? Wouldn't the autoplay feature fundamentally provide the opportunity to do something very similar?
It could. I would expect that in that case you've got a standalone executable that's being run and performing those behaviors, whereas here you've got Java code that's being interpreted by the JVM, that BDJ.
So it's past the autoplay thing, so you don't really have a choice in a sense.
Right. If you're playing this content, you're potentially open to these kind of attacks.
Yeah, we tend to think of playing a DVD as I'm just looking at some media, not really running code. And this is the thing where, well, there's a little bit of code in there. Kind of, okay.
Now, the second case is actually an attack on a physical Blu-ray player. I don't remember the model number, but it turns out that this Blu-ray player, like a lot of devices that have internet connectivity, is actually running Linux. And it's got processes running inside of it, including one for inter-process communication. And there's a server-client sort of relationship, and the client has been set up to send certain commands, like plain old operating system commands, to this IPC client server, and it just takes it and says, great. It's listening on a network port. And for some reason, TCP dump is on this player.
No kidding.
So for those who don't know TCP dump, it's there to sniff network traffic.
So it sniffs packets, and they can be perhaps captured.
It's got to be for diagnostic purposes while they were building the thing, probably.
Likely.
But it's kind of, you would think that they should take that off from the production build.
Yep. So basically, the attack is to sniff that traffic and then basically replay those bytes back to the listening server, and you can run those commands by yourself. Now, I don't know that they went and mapped out, every single possible command, but if you've got that ability, heck, you've basically got control of the box.
Right.
The researcher in this case came up with a Blu-ray disc that would actually perform both attacks. So you pop this into either one of those players, your Windows software one, or your physical player, and through certain checks, it'll figure out what it's running on and exploit each.
So do you know if any fixes are in the
Yep, NCC Group has contacted both vendors in this case and is working to get a patch out for both of these.
Good. That's encouraging. Now, you said you didn't remember the specific model. Some of the DVD players have Blu-ray players have automatic software updates. Do you know if this fits into that category?
I don't, but I would suspect that it does. Most of the larger names do support some sort of firmware update. So.
Yeah, because this really kind of fits into that category of Internet of what we put into quotes, insecure things. But if they do have the automatic software updates, that's a significant aspect of moving into the space. We have to live with the fact that all software systems have flaws, and this is a case where a flaw has been discovered, but the opportunity to fix that flaw is a real key aspect of being able to call it a not insecure thing.
You did mention automatic though, and with my experience, I've had Blu-ray players that have asked me, on boot, hey, I've got a new update, could we take the time to do that? I kind of wonder if most users are patient enough to say, I just sat down, I've got my popcorn, I've got my beverage of choice.
I was just thinking popcorn as myself. You don't want the ice melting and the popcorn getting all soggy and everything.
I do all the time. My wife, she doesn't mind at all. I said, these are the previews. Watch the software update. This is the best part.
John's favorite part is the software updates. Yeah.
That's my favorite part of the movie.
Oh, look, honey, 17%.
You obviously aren't picking the movies in your house. Okay, well, actually, a very good story. I think that's, and because I think it does sort of, take us into that dividing line between, which I think is a very important aspect of systems going forward, is that transition, these devices that aren't designed well for connecting to the internet and being able to do updates. I think flaws are going to exist. That's just a fact of life. But being able to have the system update with relatively little interruption of the use of the device, or having to have somebody actually go out and initiate, what firmware update do I need, and pulling it in and loading on the machine and doing a reboot process, things like that. So this is that aspect of this is a good sign here. We've seen other cases where devices have been compromised. The security surveillance cameras that have been significantly worse situations. Whereas what we're talking about here is you have to have a Trojan's disk, and hopefully you won't be buying those on the store shelves anytime soon.
No, well, we've heard of.
Be wary of BitTorrent, right?
Yeah.
Getting your pirated
careful,
movies off of
generating,
BitTorrent, where probably most of these things get downloaded.
Well, that's actually a good point. Good point, John. And so folks that are trying to subvert the controls that are in place, it's kind of like the off-market app stores, right? In a sense.
Or those guys on the street in New York City who are selling you very, very cheap Blu-ray discs. If you happen to buy from those markets, you might be getting in trouble.
Also a good point. Absolutely.
And if you want to go a little bit more crazy, if you have supply chain problems and somebody in your disc factory in China slips a little extra something into your disc, we may see an attack like this in the future. Now, the diversity of the platforms may not make this a widespread thing or a very, cost-effective attack, but it's possible.
No, good points. All good points. And so the threat vector has to be thought about and considered with the significance of it. The thing that came to me is I think there's still services where you can subscribe, and it's basically a DVD exchange service in a sense, where you order it and then you send it back, and who knows how many checks are done on that to verify that it's actually that this gets sent back. So who knows how far that might reach and ultimately as well.
That is an interesting idea.
It's not an idea.
You didn't mean plan, did you?
No. I just hadn't thought about that.
It's a consideration in protecting yourself.
Like Netflix, Redbox, they're all vectors, but I hadn't really thought about that.
You would have to do so much research on your target. You'd have to know that this guy happens to like obscure Russian films to make sure that your obscure Russian
if you're
fake
trying to
disc
target a specific person. But if you're just trying to proliferate.